Thanks everyone for inviting and for hearing us today. I think we need to moderate the expectations. We've been doing this a few years, but we are very slow in change as a big organization. So maybe you will find that we share learnings that are kind of like, okay, that took you 2 years. Anyways, we've tried also to embed a little bit of jokes. We have one, at least in the slides. So hopefully this will go as fun and as smooth as with the previous speakers. So for the ones of you who are not so familiar with Zurich Insurance, because it's less present here in the Nordics, we are a very big global organization, very old as well, and we are present across the globe, but in some countries, for example, we're only present with commercial insurance, so that's why maybe you're not so familiar with us. We have, like here, it says 75 million customers across the globe, many different type of customers, many different type of insurances in many different type of markets. One thing that is quite unique about us is that we're also a very decentralized organization. You have to remember that we're Swiss, so this is like federated. And this means that each of our markets has a lot of freedom in setting their own policies, deciding where they go. They have their own customers. We don't as the headquarters. And we have to kind of convince them to adopt as opposed to mandate the things that we do. And this means that when we started this, we went more into how do we empower the local teams to start a customer journey management program. We did that also because they started coming to us and saying, okay, how do you, like some of them were like, how do you start mapping journeys? And some of them were like, we've mapped all the journeys, but what do you do with them after? And we decided to do that about 2.5 years ago. And we started this quest. And also, when Martina and I joined the organization about 3 years ago, or 3.5 years already, we did a little bit of research with all of our different markets, or the biggest markets that we have. And we discovered that most of them, they had a CX team, but those CX teams, they were mostly working as kind of like advisors to the rest of the organization. They were engaged sporadically, and they did a lot of more like raising awareness than actually being involved in any kind of change or having their own initiatives or even their own budgets sometimes. And this is where we decided that maybe also a customer journey management program would empower them to go farther and to kind of like expand this way and move them from advisors into more like active drivers. And in our quest towards that, Martina and I were like preparing this, and it was like, well, what can we tell? Like, how can we group all the learnings that we've got? And we discovered a little bit like three themes that were repeating all the time across all the talks that we were having about what happened in one market and the other. And there were these three things: the ambition, the windows of opportunity, and then the more like organic development or organic growth of what we are doing. And we will review this among all the markets that we have with 3 of them that were 3 top maturity markets that started with us from the beginning in developing this program, but you will see that not all of them have been equally successful. And we will kind of dig into why this has happened farther in some of those markets and less far in some of the others, and hopefully this will be interesting for your organizations as well. So the first one is about the ambition, and this is kind of obvious, but it's like, where do you see yourself? Like, where do these CX teams see that they should be working, see what do they really want to achieve, and how do they, even as an identity, see themselves? And you have to remind that they were all being advisors when they started, and we painted a very different picture, and they all bought into it. That's why they were starting with us. But you will see that even in the very like little details of everything that we were doing with them, the ambition really started diverging. And we're going to exemplify that with a little part of what we do in a program like that. We're going to go deeper into that, and then we will see exactly what happened in each of those organizations. So if you look at the journey map, this is our kind of like a little bit of our life cycle. One thing that we started telling them is like what kind of metrics, what kind of measures would be interesting, would matter for your market to have embedded into these journeys. And most of them, they answered with NPS. It was a metric that they are very used to it. It's one of the big pillars of our voice of customer. So it made sense for CX teams to rely on NPS. But if you think about it, this tells a little bit the CX story. It tells what customers think about it, at least in the very limited view of our customers that we have in insurance. If you compare that to other industries, we have very, very little points of interaction or touch points with our customers. But this wasn't enough. We didn't want them to stop at NPS. So we started thinking about this ourselves. We started thinking about, okay, what are the customers trying to achieve? And what is the business trying to achieve? Because in order to change anything for the customers, we need to embed also what the business is trying at these points. So we started defining a little bit, okay, what are our general business goals in here? And we started thinking about how to measure them. So we started thinking about, okay, what are kind of like an efficiency metric of this part of the journey? What are we trying to achieve? Is it a conversion rate of some kind? And even beyond that, are we trying to do something else there? Are we trying, for example, to beyond the conversion do we have SLAs? Do we have something that is measuring whether these teams that are in fact delivering the experience are doing things right, and how are they being measured currently? And even beyond that, are we trying to do something else there? Are we trying, for example, to make a shift between solving things on the phone versus solving things in a digital channel or with self-service? So we started creating a potential menu of metrics around that and exposing that to the different markets and seeing what the reaction was. And we chose this because also this makes the CX relevant to the rest of the business, which is the only way that they could activate anything. And here are our three markets. As you can see, we've represented them as a very conceptual thinking guy and a very busy team that is all the time moving things around, and someone that is much more lean and quickly in reacting to things. We will not identify which markets they are in particular because we don't want to shame or reward anyone with this, but they are real markets. So the first one, for example, they started at one point, they were really instrumental in thinking, for example, the structure of our atlas and things like that. But at one point, they just got into okay, but in this issue of the ownership, why would the CX team have to own the maps? Why don't we just empower the rest of teams to create their own maps and to look after the maps? And this might be a perfectly nice approach in other organizations, but in our organization where most of the business teams haven't seen a map ever, it was really hard to push. And also, this would keep them, again, in this advisory role. They would really be still in the same role as they always had. The second market was okay, we'll do it. We have a pretty big CX team, so we'll embed this as a shared responsibility among different people in the team, and we will just keep doing this. And also in terms of the metrics, for example, they were the first ones that were okay, how do we actually measure this? What if this team doesn't have a target? How do we go about helping them see what the target should be? Things like that. So they were really pretty advanced on that. And then the third market is funny because we started this by doing some training with Mark, by the way. And they came to a training, waited for a year. We thought they had just fallen off the path. And they came back and they were we have a perfect case for this. So we are going to start with this case, and we are going to hire the very first journey coordinator we ever had at Zurich Insurance, and she will take care of that. And yeah, Martina is Martina is very enthusiastic about this market, as you will see. And finally, in the topic of the metrics, they validated that every metric that we were saying, okay, this would make sense. They had it, they were measuring it. It made sense for them. And they also added a few more. And also a very interesting topic on these is that all of them, they kind of got the internal market sponsorship that they were asking for. So the first ones were like, yeah, go ahead and do some trainings. The second one was like, okay, yeah, let's see what we can do. And the third one was like, yeah, the internal sponsorship bought in, and it was like, okay, hire a person, do this the big way. So basically, the right ambition really starts with who will be owning this and how do you make sure that this percolates the whole program. Everything is related with this ambition that you have, and this will also bring you the sponsorship you need. Because if you ask for less, definitely your sponsors are not going to give you more than what you are asking for. And I'm going to pass it on to Martina, that will guide you through the next two themes.
Hello, everyone. So I will walk you through now the second theme that we identified, that is more around identifying the windows of opportunities to seed CJM as a practice and to start using that muscle. There are two main things here. I think the first one is connection to the business, because CX teams, they don't own the systems or the channels, right? So it's really hard to change the experience when you don't own the channel or the KPIs around it. And the second one is, what is the right use case? So does it have to be this, like very strategic, very big? Does it have to be super small? So we will see how the markets work with it and how the three examples went about. So market one, they started identifying very little use cases across the whole business, different line of businesses, different teams, but they were so small that they could not really generate a lot of impact or credibility with leadership, and this didn't generate momentum for them to deploy the program further, right? It really stayed on the mapping level and on little improvements. Market two, instead, they attempted with very, very strategic programs and projects. The only problem is we are very political, and there's a lot of restructuring happening every time. So every time they looked at a very strategic project, something was happening, leadership was changing, or restructuring of teams internally led them to pause the program and having to restart from a different angle every time. Also, when you work in a very political environment, sometimes these requests for collaboration, it might seem as, okay, you're trying to make a power move and get my data, and you're like, I don't want to work with you, and there's a lot of Italians as well, so be mindful. Well, market three, they waited for the right use case. And as Itzar said, we didn't hear from them for a year, and they were like, hey, we need your support because we have this urgent request from the business. And this urgency actually generated momentum for them. And this also led to quick wins, even though we don't like the term quick wins. It generated quick wins and then enabled them to scale across the business. And this case actually was a compliance case. Compliance actually turning into CX excellence. I know it's not sexy, but it really worked well. So because of a regulatory request, they needed to handle a lot of customer communications and a lot of customer complaints, and it had to go across a lot of different teams that were quite siloed. So journey management was the perfect, let's say, practice and, let's say, organizational model, operating model for it. So they started with this, but while they were responding to regulatory requests, they realized that there were a lot of gaps and a lot of possible improvements in the journeys, and therefore they started doing quick wins around the journey while they were responding to the regulatory requests. And this is, I'd say, this is a bit like they were reactive on the regulatory side, but proactive on the CX side. And this enabled them to create credibility, generate momentum, and now it's becoming part of their ways of working, and they're expanding across the business. I'm really proud. This is actually them. They were a big advocate. They won last year a CX Award of the Year for this. I visited them 2 weeks ago. It's me. Horrible selfie, sorry, but yeah. I'd say the biggest learning then from this theme is discover the use case. It doesn't have to be the obvious one or, you know, a digital use case or anything. It could be anything. Use it as a Trojan horse, seed CJM there, and start moving that muscle. And be mindful because it could be like where you least expect it. The third thing we want to talk about is organic development. And organic development is all about how you engage with the stakeholders, and not saying we have a clear answer about that, but and how you actually embed the journey in the day-to-day, because in the end, this is a practice, right? So you need to embed it in the day-to-day of the ways of working of your organization. And we go back to our markets. The first market, again, the market without ownership, not without ownership, they didn't want ownership, but they were very good in, from the conceptual side. They helped us developing our atlas. They were with us when we started thinking about the program. However, the way they wanted to develop this practice, it was with a very well-designed playbook that then they were deploying to the business. What happened is most of business teams didn't take it up, but those that did, they started developing solutions that then were not feasible and generated friction with other teams, right? And the CX team was not owning this, so it was nowhere to be found, and this generated even more friction. Market 2, instead, they were amazing mappers, even more experienced than us at group, but they were always into the details of the map. They were not raising their heads a lot, so they missed a bit the bigger picture, right? And if you do that, sometimes you start treating the map as the deliverable and you forget about the practice. Finally, we have Market 3. You can see I have a favorite, but don't tell them. Market 3 was very interesting because the first thing we did, we started spotting regular meetings of the business teams that we're collaborating with, right? So when are you meeting monthly? When are you meeting bi-weekly? Where can we, instead of creating CJM meetings, when can we start seeding the map, right? And this enabled them to show the map at the right time with the teams. It didn't feel like an add-on on their day-to-day. And the map grew with the business teams. So the understanding grew with the map itself. My biggest learning is even if the map looks not good at all, as a service designer, you probably need to look at the map and do like, no, that's not good. But that's the right time to show it, right? That's the right time to put it in front of the stakeholders. And then you will improve. So this is the journey they had. So we started the regular meetings, we showed the maps, we started improving the maps, and one of the most amazing things that stakeholders, the business team, started saying, oh, I could use the map for this or for that. And we hadn't even thought about it, right? From there, we improved them, and we started using the maps for all different type of cases. And finally, now the maps are used for proposing initiatives at Exco. And we are driving a strategic program in January on the base of this work. So just remember, it's a way of working, it's not a deliverable. I need to remember myself as well sometimes. And yes, I'll pass it on to Itzar.
Yeah. So basically, a little bit like, as you've seen, some of our markets are still stuck in the kind of like in the ambition phase, or like in what we would see is there. Some markets have indeed transformed, even if they didn't get to the end, if they're not using the maps with the Exco yet. But they already changed. They changed their point of view. They changed even like the way they approach things, how they feel that they own things, and how they are more daring into the ways they deal with the rest of the organization. So this is already very nice. And also, this has led us to do our own parallel change. So what we did as a change is we used to, like as we said, just like work on enabling them, work on coaching them, work on creating the kind of like global pieces of it with them. But now what we are seeing is that the really like make or break point is the windows of opportunity. So besides Martina and I that run the customer journey management program, we have a bigger CX team that does let's say, kind of like big strategic CX projects around the globe with the local markets. So what we are doing is we're pairing the deployment of CJM with their projects. So while they are there working in a project, we start working in parallel, and then we keep with besides the market at the same time. So so we make sure that they have the opportunity to start using it, start like having this place to embed it, having these opportunities to put it in front of everyone while we are using it during the project, and then we keep with them until they are able to scale and they're able to gain this credibility. This is a big change, and this has led us to, for example, working back again with Market One, but directly interacting also with their business stakeholders. And this is the way that we are for now planning to continue. I hope this was interesting for everyone. And if you have questions and we have time, you can make them now, and otherwise you can also reach out to us on LinkedIn later or in the sessions.
Amazing presentation. I really love the fact that you had 3 parallel kind of tracks and then learnings from each one of them. Yeah. Exciting to see that. Any questions from the audience straight away? Again, with the Nordic crowd, it's
Hello. Yes, thank you so much. I was thinking around this with the timing of when to introduce journey mapping. Do you have any advice on how to spot those must-win opportunities like the Market 3?
I would say several things, but maybe we can both answer. About the timing of when to start, I would say right away, like start the minute you have any opportunity to map anything. And one thing that we used to do a lot was also separate the kind of project maps versus the management maps. But actually having a project map is a perfectly good way to start a management map. You just need to simplify it a bit and give it a little more structure, make sure it fits in your atlas or framework. So the mapping side you can start at any point. The practice side is where you need to have maybe this window of opportunity, and to spot that, then I don't know, Martina, if you want to add anything about what constitutes one. Like, I think we already spoke, but how do you spot it?
I think there needs to be a little bit of urgency from the business, because if they have a problem that they don't really know how to solve, and probably because it touches upon different departments and, oh my God, communicating amongst each other, different systems and everything. So a little urgency from them, because then you go there with a present, right? It's like, look, I have a present for you. It's like, look at this. Oh, wow. Yeah, that worked. Again, not too small, because I know we need to start small, I agree with that, but if it's too small, I remember in Market One, we did a very, very small journey. Like, we built the atlas and then we went really deep into the journey, and it did work. But the business was like, yeah, but what do I care about that communication? I mean, how is this impacting? So there needs to be, it could be an efficiency story, so it's helping us saving money, or it could be a customer story, so we're generating more revenue as well. It's not a customer story, this is still business, but from that perspective. So we're generating more revenue, or it could be we're saving time. So that resonated a lot. But don't go, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but don't go too big, because I don't know about the size of the organization, but there's decisions that are out of our hands. And if those are going to impact your project, then you lose the threads and the momentum. I don't know if that answers your question.
And then the other thing that is interesting is that you also see it everywhere. Like, for example, yesterday we had a call with one organization that certifies everyone that is working on transformation within our within our big business. And this was also like, this is a great opportunity because we normally work with the CX teams, but if you don't have the transformation teams besides, and actually like we work with Smaply, it has a lot of functions that really are like godsend for the transformation teams. So they were like, oh, really? Can you do that? Like, and so it's always like find someone that this would help with their own goals and use it there. So start wherever. It doesn't really matter. If it's something that goes a little bit across, it's better. And it doesn't have to be a great map. And then just spot more people that might want to put more layers on top of that.
Excellent. Let's take one more question from there. We can extend it a bit. There was a question there.
You're the boss.
Just quick question before we switch.
Yeah, Martina, you mentioned how you need to remind yourself it's a way of working, not a deliverable. And changing the way people work is very difficult. So how do you kind of do that hand-holding and that massaging? And I'm talking beyond like show them, you know, the value and the business value, because that's how you sell it to begin with, right? But like actually in the day-to-day, do you have any tips? Thank you.
I remember we were working with the CX team in Market 3 and some business team because they had to resolve those regulatory requirements. And as I said before, like we were like, okay, we need to validate what we put in the map, what we got out of the research and out of different teams. We need to validate the structure and have a bit of feedback from stakeholders. Let's schedule a meeting with them. And I was like, okay, maybe don't they have a monthly? Don't they have a monthly when they discuss all the priority points? And I was like, just take 20 minutes there. It's not gonna feel like more work for them. Oh my God, I need to go to another alignment meeting or give feedback or another workshop, right? And then just show it there. And the first time they see it, they might be, okay, what is this? What am I looking at? Oh no, another tool. Oh no, another visualization. The second time, they're like, oh, but don't you have something there that tells this? Or couldn't we do this in a different way? And they start, reacting to the map. And by the third time, they start identifying use cases. So that is my biggest, I remember we were looking at the atlas for another countries the other day, and we were discussing on the map and refining, and in the Gantt there was a moment and show the map here to stakeholders. I was like, no. Do it from the beginning. Do it from the beginning, even if the map is written in the worst language ever, or the structure is not right, or you're not super sure about what they want to see. Because it's easier to say, I want that, I don't want that, if they have something in front, right? So that's my biggest advice.